The pads come on today as the New Orleans Saints enter week 2 of training camp, and offensive lineman Trevor Penning has got to show what he's got. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network on SI. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, the New Orleans Saints are kicking off padded practices as week 2 of training camp gets underway. We'll take a look at why Kendre Miller's return is pivotal in week 2. He needs to find his way back to the field, why wide receiver A.T. Perry needs to show more this week, and we're going to take a look at the players that are going to benefit the most from these padded practices, leading off with Trevor Penning, who has a golden opportunity in front of him this very week. We appreciate you. As always, make a Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In today's episode, brought to you by friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. FanDuel is making sure that sports never stop sporting all summer long, because right now, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. That means that there's something for everyone every day all summer long over at FanDuel.com. Make sure you go and check them out. Get started today. Trevor Penning has a big week ahead of him as the pads go on for the New Orleans Saints. Big opportunity to prove that he has made strides, has made the leaps, and deserves to hold down that starting tackle spot. Now, we believe that starting tackle spot is going to be at right tackle. It's where he has exclusively worked here all throughout training camp, OTAs, call it any of the offseason workouts, all those things. Meanwhile, Taliesin Fuaga has worked out over on the left side this entire time as well. I think what we know about the New Orleans Saints offensive line is that 3 players are solidified. Erik McCoy is solidified at center. Cesar Ruiz is solidified at right guard. And then Taliesin Fuaga is solidified, right? Like, he will start for the Saints. It looks like it's going to be at left tackle, but it might end up being back over at right tackle, which is where he ended up playing, or where he was playing during college, right where the Saints ended up drafting him. He had 2 years at Oregon State. Both of them were at right tackle, all that. But it seems more likely that he's going to be sticking on the left side of the line and being that blind side protector for Derek Carr. Center Erik McCoy said Taliesin Fuaga is the most impressive or the best rookie that he has seen over his years. So high praise for the rookie. But it's Penning on the opposite side that has to prove something here over the course of this week. He's looked mostly good. He's had some moments. He's had some wins. He's had some losses. Pretty much what you would expect through the first week of training camp. But once these pads go on and the physicality ticks up, this is Trevor Penning's brand. This is his game. He's the mauler. He's the run protector, all those things. So he is among the players that benefit the most from kind of turning the page into the padded practice area of practices for the New Orleans Saints. He and the rest of the offensive line obviously benefit from this as well. Ticking up the physicality. It's going to particularly have an impact in executing the run game and all that. No longer will we be sitting back over on the sideline going, well, it looked like they were in good position there. It looked like that hole might have opened up, or it looked like that player might have gotten into the backfield or whatever it might be. Less that, more, okay, they're actually not hitting each other, but they're actually making contact with one another, wrapping each other up, blocking and engaging fully, like going at it with full pads, all those other things. So we'll get a better understanding of the run game and the offensive line throughout all this. But I wanted to highlight Trevor Penning because this week he could end up solidifying himself as the starter at right tackle if he plays well enough. Now, I'm sure that they want to get preseason snaps and all that kind of stuff in as well, get a look at him there. But this can at least take him a step forward, or a big time step forward in that conversation. On the other side of the line of scrimmage, just as important for the defensive line, of course, being able to see the defensive line really engage in a pass rush, really engage in run stopping, all of that by ticking up that level of physicality, watching how they respond. I think that that's going to be the other unit that benefits the most. No more are we going to have to ask the question about whether or not a player would have been able to make the stop. We'll see them make the stop because, as we mentioned before, they'll wrap up the tackler. They'll be more physical, all of these other things. Carl Granderson has made at least a play a day every single day getting into the backfield for the Saints defensive line. Does he continue that with the physicality ticked up? Does he get even more? Does he make even more plays now that the physicality ticks up and it's playing to his brand of the game? And him matching up with Trevor Penning all throughout training camp, like you want to talk about something that's going to make Trevor Penning better, it's going up against the team's best pass rusher, and that is Carl Granderson, without a doubt. And so seeing those two go back and forth, it's typically a pretty good thing there. We've also seen on other instances and other circumstances, Cam Jordan and Trevor Penning lineup, to where you have your most crafty, most experienced pass rusher. He's coming through and being able to kind of help elevate what a Trevor Penning can be as well. So all of this kind of, benefits from one another, but it's clear that offensive line and defensive line are two places, or the two places, that get the greatest benefit from the pads going on at Saints practices here as we continue on with week 2 of Saints training camp. A couple of other positions that I think this is really important for. I'll start off at running back, and in particular, I think that it's particularly important for Kendre Miller if he gets back out there, and if not, it becomes very important for Jordan Mims if he gets back out there. We'll talk more about Jordan Mims here in a little bit, but I did want to acknowledge, of course, running back, linebacker, like those spots can get up there. I'm about to end up naming like all of the positions. Here's what I'll say about the last piece that I wanted to bring, because now that I've said offensive line, defensive line, running back, and linebacker, which I wasn't going to say linebacker at first, but yeah, of course, they benefit from it. Now I'm about to say wide receiver and corner. And now you're like, okay, so you're just going to throw in tight end, safety, and quarterback at some point, Ross? Here's what I'll say about wide receiver and corner. It's not necessarily that the physicality ticking up is going to really benefit them as much as it's going to benefit the offensive line and defensive line, right? Like that's an entirely different conversation. I think that the thing that the pads going on typically creates are the opportunities for one-on-ones for pass catchers and DBs. And so it's not necessarily that the physicality on a team drill makes something better or worse or harder, or, creates a little bit of a greater takeaway for when they make plays and things like that. For me, it's that one-on-ones typically get introduced around this time. And so it's another opportunity to show something in a different way. We know that one-on-ones are severely weighted towards the offense. So when defensive players can find ways to make plays there, that ends up shining big on them. And then, of course, the offensive players get the spectacular catch, the wow factor, all these other things to help to boost their profile a little bit more as contested catch guys, winning one-on-one opportunities, winning 50-50 balls, all that kind of stuff. And that's a place where a guy like wide receiver A.T. Perry could really shine. When he got to training camp last year, he had some drops issues and he wasn't winning those contested catches. Then when he got into the season over the course of those last 7 games or so, the contested catches were his entire brand. He got in a way better spot when it came to that. And so does he pick up from where he left off here in 2024's training camp coming out of 2023? The one-on-ones give you the first early glimpse of that. Coming up next, I want to continue on with A.T. Perry because he's one of a few players that I think needs to show more in week 2 before he ends up getting left behind. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and our official sports betting partners here on the Locked On Podcast Network. FanDuel's doing everything that they can to make sure that summer sports continue sporting with the MLB, the NBA, not the NBA, the WNBA, the Olympics, all of that ongoing here all throughout the summer. And of course, with football on the way, FanDuel is absolutely a place to be. When I look at FanDuel right now, one of the things that's super exciting is that they're giving right now all customers a free boost or bonus all summer long. So that means that there's something for everyone every day, all summer long over at FanDuel. So just head over to FanDuel.com so that you can get started today in making the most of your summer. You can bet on win totals for the Saints. You can bet on MLB games. You can bet on the Olympics. There's stuff on that too. There's a ton for you to check out over on FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, family. A.T. Perry, New Orleans Saints second-year wide receiver, was expected to be a standout in training camp. So far, we haven't seen that. And so week 2 is going to be very, very important for the young wide receiver. We appreciate you very much for making us your first listen of the day every day. You want to know what's going on around the rest of NFL training camps? Make sure you go and check out Locked On Sports Today's 24/7 stream program specifically to bring you the biggest stories from around the world of sports from the local experts that know the teams the best. Go and check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, of all the players that I look at going into week 2, thinking back to their week 1 and trying to project who needs a big week this week, A.T. Perry, New Orleans Saints wide receiver, is the one that always jumps to my mind first. We've seen nice things from Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed at all 3 levels. We've seen some nice moments from Cedric Wilson, who had a really solid practice a few days ago. I think it was the Friday practice when the passing game really finally started to open up. And that's a good piece of context to remember as well, is that the Saints have done 4 practices so far, none of them in pads, and the first 2 were very, very run-heavy days. Passing game really has only opened up over the course of the past 2 practices. So looking at the passing game and saying, hey, you want to see more from it, there's a real opportunity to see more from it as the passing game continues to open up. You know what I mean? It's not a situation to where we're looking at it and going to go, okay, we need to see more from this player, that player, this player in the passing game, and then the run game dominates practices. I would imagine that the run game will dominate one of these padded practices this week. I would imagine that to be the case because pads go on, you're wanting to be an offense predicated on your run game, all of that. So that still gives A.T. Perry an opportunity to stand out, though, when asked to block on the perimeter. And then being able to make plays in the passing game is then going to be kind of the next step for him. So even if it is a little bit run heavy, he still has an opportunity to show something, to impress, to kind of show the value proposition that he brings to the field. So far, we've seen standouts at wide receiver. I mentioned the top 3, but Mason Tipton, the undrafted free agent from Yale, had great plays over the course of the Saturday practice where, Spencer Rattler had a big day, and his big day was because of 2 completions to Mason Tipton, right? There were some other things that Spencer did well that day too, but it was really about the big completions to Mason Tipton that ended up being the ones that stuck with you, right? The big sexy plays that everybody's talking about and all those other things. And so we're watching Mason Tipton make plays. We're seeing stuff from Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. Cedric Wilson had a nice day. We just want to see more from A.T. Perry, I think, is going to be one of the big things that the Saints are going to be looking for over the course of this week. He has a real opportunity here. He has a big-time opportunity because he can be the Saints' 3rd wide receiver. He could be the X receiver that lines up on the outside when they want to move Chris Olave into the slot to add an additional wrinkle, all those other things. He's just got to be able to show that. And as I mentioned before, with pads going on, that typically gives you the opportunity to start doing one-on-ones and things like that as well. And so that could be a way for him maybe to build some confidence by winning some of those one-on-one reps and then walk into the team drills and be able to make some plays there. And if he can do that, then I think that goes a long way for A.T. Perry. This is the week for him to really kind of reestablish himself as somebody that deserves to be a part of that wide receiver conversation. And I'm talking about near at the upper end of the wide receiver conversation, just behind the top 2 guys that we know are the dynamic duo, the stars, when it comes to the pass catching part of the game. Another player that I think week 2 is really important for is Jordan Mims. And this one goes on a different side. So the undrafted free agent running back that joined the team last year via waivers, he's not a guy that we're looking at and going, okay, well, he didn't show much week 1, and so therefore we need to see more week 2. It's just he might have a golden opportunity in front of him. If Kendre Miller is still not able to get back out on the field here in week 2 as he's working on that hamstring rehab that Dennis Allen outlined, then Jordan Mims has a real opportunity to go out here during padded practices, make a first impression in the first impression of the new run game in pads, right? The real physicality where we finally really get a look at this run game. He gets to show some of the physicality. He gets to show his receiving prowess out of the backfield. It's just everything is here and on the table for Jordan Mims walking into week 2. And so if he's able to make something happen with that and impress here over the course of this week, that could make things really, really interesting at the running back spot. Really, really interesting at the running back spot. And so that's a big one that I'm going to be watching. And again, it's not because he hasn't shown anything over the first week. He had some nice moments over the course of the first week. This is really just about taking advantage of an opportunity that sits ahead of him. Another guy that I'm really excited to see in this situation or in this padded practices situation that I think needs a little bit more of a standout is Pete Werner. Pete Werner got off to a bit of a hot start here during training camp. Now I want to see him carry that in when the physicality ticks up. He's been a player that really consistency has been the only kind of concern with him. late or early on in seasons, he's typically near the top of the NFL in tackles. Then he kind of hits a dip, or he's dealt with some, health stuff. And then at the end of the season, he tends to tick up. After that, he's been adding a little bit of playmaking to his game as well. So I think that there's some things that he might be able to do here over the course of this week that just kind of show a little bit more of the consistency. So it's not that we're not seeing it. It's not that we have seen it. It's that we want to continue to see it when it comes to Pete Werner. And I think that could potentially go a pretty long way for him, because Willie Gay has been the big standout of camp, or one of the big standouts of camp. I think that's fair to say. DeMario's been kind of rotating in and out. There's been opportunities for guys like Jalen Ford. Anthony Orji's made a ton of plays as well. So I think that a guy like Pete Werner, like, there's enough going on around him at his position that it could kind of, boost him up a little bit, juice him up a little bit, and kind of be like, all right, I got to go out here and keep making plays, right? Not start making plays, but keep making plays, because he did make some plays early on in camp. And then lastly, I think one of the other guys that I'm really interested to see more from in these padded practices is a couple of, because it's really a couple of rookies. It's Sally Ese-Fuanga on the left tackle, and then Kool-Aid McKinstry over on the defensive side. I don't know if Marshon Lattimore is going to be back. Him missing the practice before padded practices and then having the day off, maybe throwing him into the first padded practice might not be a great idea, but maybe he's back and working on, drills and stuff like that if he is back. But maybe doesn't get into team drills and everything. Like, they might work him back up. But even if he's not around, if he is around, whatever, Kool-Aid's going to get opportunities on the outside when it comes to those team drills. Whether they were in nickel or they were in base and first team sets, Kool-Aid was on the outside with Paulson Adebo on the opposite side. And he is just a big, stocky, physical, strong dude. And now he's about to put pads on for the first time in the NFL. And I'm really excited to see that. I think he has a real opportunity to prove something here over the course of this week as well. So those are the guys that I think have the most to prove / need to prove the most in A.T. Perry and Jordan Mims' case, just for different reasons. Coming up next, I want to take a look at the important things about attendance here in week 2 that we'll be tracking. And of course, New Orleans Saints made a couple of roster changes, so we'll get you caught up on those as well as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by friends at Game Time, the best place to go to buy tickets for your favorite events wherever you are. I'm going to tell you right now exactly why you need to use Game Time. Yesterday, John Hendricks and I, Sunday off during Saints practice, we decided, you know what, let's go to an Angels game. John and I bought tickets on the third baseline, section 105, for $9 a piece. $9 a piece. And when it showed $9 a piece on Game Time's app, by the way, and I clicked and I did too, what I actually paid was actually $18. I paid the price that it showed me, not a bunch of hidden fees and stuff like that. My first ever MLB game, and the Angels claw back from a 6-0 hole and hit a grand slam. I got to see my first ever grand slam. Go to Game Time, buy tickets, enjoy your life. Game Time is going to help you do that. Here's how you do it. Head over and download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use that promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Let's get it. Who Dat Nation? The New Orleans Saints have been dealing with way more injuries than you'd like for them to have to navigate early on through the first 4 days of training camp. But moving into week 2, Kendre Miller, New Orleans Saints' second-year running back, is probably the return that you're most wanting to see if you're the New Orleans Saints as they continue on with week 2 in these padded practices. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being here. Don't forget, we are your team every day. We'll be live today after practice, and then a new episode tomorrow morning, just breaking down everything you need from Saints training camp day 5, first day of padded practices. Also got some really, really awesome personal news to share coming up later on in the week as well. So make sure that you continue to come back for all of that. So for the Saints going into this week, I think the return of Kendre Miller might be the most important return for an individual player. Obviously, like the return of Marshon Lattimore would be big for New Orleans. He, was dealing with that hip flexor injury, a little bit of a hip flexor, as Dennis Allen said. And so having him back out on the field, of course, has the biggest impact for the team. There's no doubt about that. But in terms of health impacting a player's future outlook, Kendre Miller's is probably the most important. And the reason why I say that is because you could just kind of feel the tone around Kendre Miller as a very, let's just say, not so positive one when folks are talking about him. I don't think that that's a mystery. Like, go and watch Dennis Allen's press conferences, for instance, and things like that. And so I think him getting back out on the field would be the most important thing for him. But the thing that's so challenging about this is the hamstring of it all, right? These hamstring injuries are pesky. It's always a matter of when, not if, they resurface, and all those things. They can be really, really tough. And so I think this week is really, really important for Kendre Miller. If he can't get back out on the field this week, I think there are going to be some major questions that are going to start being asked about him, and there are going to be opportunities to start looking in other directions, especially if the absence is paired with what we were discussing earlier, Jordan Mims having a strong second week, which would be huge for Jordan Mims. So I just think that there's something about this injury that has kind of worked on the Saints' patience a little bit. It really feels that way. And look, maybe I'm reading into things that I shouldn't be reading in, but I'm not the only one that feels this way. And so I'll be really interested to see if Kendre is able to get back out on the field. And if he does, if he's able to stay out on the field, make plays, do the things that we saw him do in that closing week, that week 18 game against the Atlanta Falcons, where he looked outstanding. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, there it is. We get it. So many Saints fans were upset about, Kendre Miller being drafted instead of Tajay Spears. And look at what Tajay Spears looked like during his rookie season and what he could potentially look like, especially in this offense. Like, he would be a perfect fit for this offense. So I get the frustration of the what could have been, but typically the only way to combat the what could have been is to show what is. And if what is isn't positive, you're never combating the what could have been. And this is an important week, I think, for Kendre Miller. Does this week solidify his future or solidify his, or lack thereof? No, absolutely not. But I think that he could answer a lot of questions this week if he makes it back out on the field and if he excels in these padded practices. So I think that that's a big one as well. The other players that we're still continuing to track and keep an eye out on are Shane Lemieux, New Orleans Saints offensive lineman. He was out there in practice or at practice on Saturday. He was watching off to the side. He was not participating. But it's always good still to see the presence of the player out there. That typically means good things. Of course, Marshon Lattimore is another one to where if we at least saw him today, I think that would probably alleviate some concerns as well. And then Justin Herron, New Orleans Saints offensive tackle, he was the one that was dealing with a knee injury. I believe it was the first day of camp. And he is now been placed on injured reserve. So his season is over. So that is a big shift for the New Orleans Saints there, who were looking at Justin Herron as, a key depth piece at right tackle. He's a guy that could have made the roster. NFL experience, athletic, some familiarity with the quarterback, all these things. Like he had a shot. But it's going to be very interesting now to see what the depth of right tackle breaks out to be, because so far what we've been seeing is Trevor Penning, Landon Young, and then it was kind of a blend of Ali Udoh as well as Justin Herron. So now it feels like Udoh is the one that kind of gets solidified there as the other offensive tackle at right tackle behind Landon Young. And the thing that's really nice about that is that if you're the Saints and you want to keep your starting 5 offensive linemen and 3 O-line, you have a real opportunity in 3 depth O-line that can play multiple positions. Guys like Lucas Patrick, Landon Young, and Ali Udoh give you that. So as long as those 3 guys stay healthy, then I think the New Orleans Saints are in a good place when it comes to their offensive line to at least be able to have their starting 5 and 3 pretty solid veteran rotational depth options. And a guy like Udoh, a guy like Young, a guy like Patrick could start for you as well, especially Patrick, especially Lucas Patrick. I think the battle between him and Nick Saldiveri is maybe more present than the other offensive line battles. But I think that is he's an important guy to hold on to here over the course of the offseason. And then if Shane Lemieux makes his way back, then he definitely enters that conversation as well. All right, the Saints made a couple of transactions. I mentioned Justin Herron going to injured reserve with his season being over. The Saints also moved on from offensive lineman Mark Evans. So that is one more HBCU player down. The Saints only have one more HBCU player on the roster. That is Mac McCain from North Carolina A&T. But the waiving of Mark Evans, not super surprising. I mean, he's fast, he's athletic, he's smart, he's all these things. It's just that it just kind of wasn't coming together on the field for him. Some, false start things, there might have been some holding things I heard about and stuff like that. So it just wasn't working. This probably doesn't close the door entirely on Mark Evans. The Saints have actually done this before. They've moved on and brought him back. So we'll see if they end up bringing him back later on. But to help fill those two spots, right? They move on from a tackle in Justin Hare and they move on from a guard in Mark Evans. They signed tackle Jesse Davis, who has a ton of NFL experience, over 1,000 snaps in the last 2 seasons that he's played. He's played left tackle, but he's also played, he's played both tackle spots and both guard spots. He's just one of those guys that is one that you can move around. And that's exactly what you're looking for in these types of situations, to where you're trying to, bring in more depth, trying to bring in guys to make sure your numbers are good on the offensive line in training camp. You need guys that can play in multiple spots. So he's absolutely able to do that. And he played at both those tackle, both those guard positions in 2020 and 2021, but didn't appear in games in 2022 or 2023. So something to watch out for in terms of does he have the conditioning? Does he have what he needs to be able to get out there today? 6'6", 309 is Jesse Davis. The Saints also added Tremaine Ankrum from the most recently the Los Angeles Rams, but also played right tackle with Clemson, full-time right tackle over in Clemson. He was a 7th-round draft pick by the Rams in 2020, missed the 2021 season, but only has played about 101 NFL offensive snaps so far in his career, the majority of which, over 90, being last year with the Rams. 6'2", 314 pounds. So shows you why he made the transition from tackle to guard in the NFL. It makes perfect sense there. The other interesting thing about these additions, going back to Jesse Davis for just a moment, is, and this has been a bit of a trend for the Saints, is that he used to be a defensive tackle. He was actually recruited to Idaho as a defensive tackle. Started his first season there and then moved over to offensive tackle. This has been a little bit of a trend for the New Orleans Saints. They did this. This was Josiah Aziram, who they drafted in the 7th round this year, and stuff like that as well. So I think these guys are going to be good rotational pieces, veteran experience guys, especially Davis has the veteran experience. But I don't know that they're going to be they're final roster guys or initial roster guys. We'll see. All right, y'all, I appreciate you very much, as always, making us your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, you can come back later on today to check out the live show post-practice. You've also got Locked On Pelicans with Jake Madison, Locked On LSU with our good friend Matt Moscona. We appreciate you very much, as always, making Locked On Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, them, how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And Trust You That Nation. I'll holla at you.